this program, Obermann Conversations, is one way in which we do this. And this series brings faculty and graduate students and experts from our community into conversation together. This is the second Obermann Conversations of this year. We try to do one every month during the academic year. And so just a preview, coming up on November 8th at the Old Capitol Senate Chambers on the Pennacrest, Chuck Connerly, who's the Director of Urban and Regional Planning, and author Connie Mutel will be discussing Water, Prairies, and Climate Change, Iowa's Environment in Historical Perspective. And then kind of jumping through the holiday season, we'll return on February 15th back in this room, and Susan Shalot and Nancy Hauserman will be in conversation with the director of the Obermann Center, Teresa Mangum, about a new nonprofit called Trail of Johnson County that aims to help local seniors be able to stay living in their homes. Today's conversation, I'm very happy to be able to introduce Mary Cohen and Rhonda Miller, who are both contributing so much to our community and who I've had the pleasure of knowing both of them for a long time in different ways. So Mary, at the moment, is an Obermann Fellow in Residence, and she's working on a book, Silenced Voices, Music Making in U.S. Prisons. She's a faculty member in the School of Music in the College of Education, and she founded and also directs the Oakdale Community Choir, which we'll hear about more today, a combined group of men incarcerated at the Iowa Medical and Classification Center and community members. And Rhonda Miller is a music therapist with Iowa City Hospice. She has directed multi-age choirs both in this area and on the East Coast, and is a gifted musician. Rhonda has 3 school-aged kids, and I will just say that they grew up down the street from me and are the same age as my kids, so that's how I know Rhonda. And a few years ago, she returned to school to get her graduate degree in music therapy, which she completed 2 years ago. So with that introduction.
Correction, was
yes.
it the graduate degree music therapy equivalency?
Okay.
State that up front.
All right. Well, we don't want you to cheat right now.
No, I don't want to cheat.
So I'm going to momentarily hand the baton to Mary to start us off.
Greetings. Thanks so much for everybody to come today. We are grateful. I think I gave you 2 copies by accident. What we're going to start with, because the topic of our meeting today is singing, guess what we're going to do? You got it. And first, before we do anything related to singing, is to know that, guess what? Singing is a learned skill. I'll say it again. Singing is a learned skill. So what that means is, no matter what, if someone in your life maybe said something to you like,
You can't sing.
all that tells you is that person doesn't know that singing is a learned skill. So keeping that in mind, the song that we're going to sing is called Beauty Before Me. It's a pretty simple song that only lasts for 4 measures long. We'll just sing it a number of times after I teach it to you by phrase. It's a song that we use in the Oakdale Choir at the beginning of most rehearsals and at the beginning of all the concerts, or toward the beginning of the concerts. So with that information, may I ask you to stand. Go ahead and stretch your arms over your head, just in case you maybe haven't used your body in that way in a while. Give yourself a little twist. Shoulders roll back. And we're going to inhale and open your mouth. Swallow, relax your throat. I'll sing the whole tune so you know it. And those in the choir who know it, please join me so you can hear the song straight through. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty above and below and all around. One phrase at a time. Listen, then sing. Beauty before me, beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty behind me, beauty above and below and all around, beauty above and below and repeat it a number of times, join in as you wish, or you can sing by hearing, if that's more pleasurable for your body today. Give yourself a nice inhale. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty above and below and all around. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty above and below and all around. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty above and below and all around. One more time. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty above and below and all around. Thank you. And give yourself a way to go. You sound wonderful. Wunderbar.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. Thanks,
Thank
Jennifer.
you. Nice pick up this late afternoon on this kind of gray day. So one of the things that I was hoping that each of you would share is you're both working in music right now and doing this tremendous community-based work, and it's clear that you believe in the transformational power of music via what you're doing. But I'm curious about kind of going back when you were first struck by that. What is your own connection to singing in your life? And was there a point, maybe going way back, I don't know quite when that was, when you were like, oh, this isn't maybe just something that I show up and do in school or whatever, or in church, but it has this deeper meaning.
For me, I grew up Mennonite, and I'm still a part of the Mennonite congregation, and the memory of music is the first time I was able to stand, and Mennonites sing in 4-part a cappella singing. So it was the first time I was in church and I could carry the melody by myself while my mother sang alto beside me, and I heard the bass and the tenor, and there was just this feeling and this sense of accomplishment and the sense of connection, and I just felt that was my moment, I guess, because I'd always carried it with my parents, but to be able to hold my own voice in the midst of a community was very powerful for me.
Wow. How old were you?
I think I was 9.
Oh.
But I was singing melody, so, but by that point, I'd heard the same songs repetitively enough that I could very easily do that by myself.
Well, I have a completely different story. I think my answer is that it's still in process. But I grew up playing piano my whole life, and in fact, from 7th grade until moving to Iowa, I played piano or directed a choir at a church. And I played piano even my senior year in high school. My high school paid me money to play piano for the high school musical. I thought that was really cool. And I played piano for all the choirs. I didn't sing in an ensemble until I got to college as an undergraduate and was required to sing in a choir for my degree, because I had a bachelor's of music education undergraduate degree with a piano emphasis. So piano was always what I was doing. Then finished my degree and started teaching at an elementary K-8 school, vocal instrumental, and was a little bit like, whoa, now I need to learn, I didn't need to teach people how to sing. So I had to teach myself solfege, because we didn't have that in our program. That's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, solfege. That's how I was able to really make a sense. I thought I could just sit at the piano and teach myself how to sing. It doesn't work like that. So for me, the background for singing was very incremental. And I think when it comes to this concept of the power of singing, I have a pretty clear memory in graduate school. I went to the University of Kansas, and I spent a lot of my graduate school in prison, literally and figuratively. I was researching a choir at a prison in Kansas called the East Hill Singers that met at the Lansing Correctional Facility, in the East Unit of that facility. And in that process of collecting data, I was going in twice a week and assisting the choir director. So since I was taking men out of the rehearsal to interview them So I said, how can I help? And she said, why don't you assist them all as they were singing? So I will never forget, one man came out, I was right outside of the chapel, and he said, I used to be the leader of a rock band, and he sang some tune, and then I was assisting him in learning how to sing and match pitch. And for him, he would struggle to sustain a pitch. He would go, ooh, and his voice dropped. And did that a number of times. And finally, when he was able to hold his breath with enough management to sustain the pitch, he was focusing so hard that his eyes fluttered. Because when you're thinking really hard, it's hard to give someone eye contact because your focus is somewhere else. And I just thought, wow. And he wrote on a survey later that was one of his most meaningful experiences when he did the one-on-one and realized he could actually sing.
Wow. So that kind of touches on the word and the title of this talk of transformational. And so reflecting on what that word means to you, and specifically in regard to your present work, and maybe an example of a time where you've really seen that in action.
Yeah. I think the way music is, a lot of people go into hospice, or people are afraid of hospice, put it that way. Our culture is very leery of talking about death, and there's a real hesitancy to accept that the end of life is near. But in reality, hospice is about life, and it's about treating the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. So music is so transformational in that because it is a modality that touches mind, body, and spirit, and helps to ease suffering, to tell the people's stories, to validate life, because the point is using the music that, if you will, has been kind of the soundtrack of the person's life. So I don't go in with a prescribed set of music that I think is comforting. What I do is interview or assess the person's response, and I often make sure I know their birth date, because if they can't tell me what music they like, I go to music that was popular in their teens, 20s, kind of those coming of age years, and then I kind of try one from different genre and see which music gets that toe tapping or they're mouthing words, so it's transformative in that regard. And I think the very primary transformative is that I'm working with someone with dementia who can no longer hold a conversation, but use of that music that's familiar and comforting and stored in long-term memory builds this bridge of connection. And that's one of the points of hospice, is building connections with loved ones. And when you can use music to do that. I was told once by someone, and these are some of the tidbits that I put in my back pocket, you brought my dad back to us through the music. So that would be, there's lots of ways it's transformative, but to keep it short, that would be a very primary one.
Wow. That's a great story, because it actually connects quite a bit to the story I'm going to share. And I think it's fascinating, this point Rhonda's brought up about how there's not an openness of talking about death, because I think that's something that we might want to think about in our culture, and why that is, and what's preventing our conversation. Because my experience was related to personal life experience and also the choir at Oakdale. So I'm the youngest in my family of 6 children, and my sister closest in age to me. Keep in mind, my oldest sibling is 16 years older than me. And it went 1 year, 1 year, 1 year apart, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years apart. So the sister 5 years older than me was who I grew up with and my role model throughout my life. And she, in fact, earned her PhD, which influenced me to earn mine. She started teaching group fitness, which influenced me to do that as well. A lot of things. So on May 20th of 2012, she, who was on her way to an agility trial with her 2 German short-haired pointers in Washington, D.C. 6:30 in the morning, the sun was coming up and blinded her view of someone that had fallen asleep at the wheel and crossed the median and hit her car head-on. So she left her body, and one of her 2 dogs as well. And it was the first experience in my life that I was all of a sudden, what's grief? What does grief mean? What is death? What is the purpose of life? It was huge for me. The week after Judy's accident, a bunch of her friends at an agility trial, which is basically an obstacle course for dogs, gave out these bracelets to celebrate Judy. And the bracelet said, WWJudyD. What would Judy do? Question mark. And the answer was find the joy. So that was, that spring, I decided I needed to write a song. At the Oakdale Choir, songwriting is a core part of what we do. Most of the songs that I've contributed to, other people have written lyrics that I've set to music. But I decided I should write the lyrics, and the whole process of thinking that, next 8 months of, how do we grieve? How do we find joy when you're trying to make sense of life? So I'd written the song, we'd learned it for that next spring concert where the theme was Morning is Broken, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, Morning is Broken. And we had the song done and we were working on it, and as we were walking out of choir rehearsal, one of the outside choir members, the Oakdale Choir, by the way, is made up of women and men. Many people here you see wearing purple shirts that come into the Oakdale prison and sing with men who are incarcerated, inside singers. It's one choir. One of the outside singers, Kevin Coomer, said, Mary, you know what? I don't think we have to go out and find joy. It's always within us. We just have to pause and feel it. So I went, of course. I've heard that before, but I hadn't reflected on it in that way. So then I changed the end of the song, because the lyrics went, I remember how the lyrics go, we seek to find the joy, but the very end we changed it to we pause and feel the joy. And for me, many of that experience was pretty transformational because, as you know, working in grief, working with people passing on, this is a huge life issue that is important to think about and talk about.
That makes me think of the voice. So as a writer, the power of the voice. And I also think of, in this state, the caucus and having a voice in the political process. And so as far as the voice in singing as a place of kind of self-power, just reflecting on that as far as the inmates and the folks who are in the passing process, what that power, how that plays a role of being able to actually contact their voice when they might feel voiceless or disempowered.
Go ahead.
That can go many ways, and I bet if we opened the floor right now, we'd have probably, 20 brilliant answers. So I think the whole concept of power would depend on how you're defining power, but self-power of identity, I think, would be related to that concept of power. How are we identifying ourselves? And many of the research studies I've read, I'm doing a lot of reading about right now of music programs that happened in prison contexts in the 1900s. And I just shared one today with Jennifer that's in my bag over there from the 1950s. It was a juvenile facility where a boy auditioned to be in the choir at this facility, had no idea that he could sing he just was able to sing. Keep in mind, it's a learned skill. And this is a person that had a lot of struggle in school, really just was a disciplinary problem, but once this person was able to sing, was able to identify very positively with who he was as a person and didn't have as many of these kinds of behavior issues. And another study that I read recently, I think this was around, in California, the San Francisco fire was 1906, and it happened after that, so maybe 1908 or so. So far, of all the stuff I found, this is the first documented music program in prison that was led by an educator coming in. And this man, his name's Homer Henley. His article was published in 1929. He went into a reform school in California and had 150 boys sing with him. And he did not give one demerit. A demerit in that context would mean that they would have additional time on their sentence. They also did corporal punishment in this prison, and he describes this in a very depressing, ugly description. And so these are boys that had those things going on in their other contexts. all these 150 boys, 0 demerits, and he was able to take them out to the California State Fair. None of them fled. He described 3 leaders of the boys in the facility who were, really, really supporting this project, and how, I guess he had some tobacco that was lost, and one of the leaders, this man turned his back to the choir, and one of the leaders, within like 30 seconds, got the tobacco and returned it to him. But the story I'm sharing is that there's example upon example in research that singing can really provide us opportunity, that power of finding our own voice. And by that, I think you're probably referring to the same idea of finding who our authentic self is, who our authentic nature is, and celebrating that. Mm-hmm. So I think singing can do that in remarkable ways.
Mm-hmm. And the story that comes to mind for me, again, it's related to self-identity, but I was working with a woman with advanced dementia, and when I walked into the nursing home and I approached her and greeted her, she grabbed me and said, "Help me find myself." And was very agitated and troubled, and so I sat with her and I held hands, and I didn't even use the guitar. I just held her hands and looked in her eyes, and we sang together. And at first she just watched me, and then little by little she started singing along, and you just saw the tension go out of her body. And it was a way of connecting with self through, dementia causes this muddle of thoughts, and but when you engage in music, I've heard it described as cognitive fireworks in the brain that kind of circumvents diseased portions, and you can find again a sense of wholeness. So that power through music. And some of my interesting is it's not all. Sometimes the individual sings, but sometimes it's my voice providing them with that familiarity. And sometimes, and what I watch for, it's not all about them singing, it's about a finger tapping, and sometimes it's as slight as a toe tapping, but I'm watching, or a change in breathing patterns. Or even if I'm visiting someone and it's final days, which in hospice speak means the nurse has said, we have probably 3 to 6 days. They've stopped eating, they've stopped drinking, they're watching the medical side of things. And then when I visit, and often there's family at bedside, and we use the music to bring connection that way. And then sometimes it's as simple as an eyebrow raise, or the responses are minimal at that point, or the breathing change again. So it's taking a situation that often feels really powerless, and putting power and choice and control back into that situation, be it. Because as much as possible, I give the individual the choice of what the songs are. And if they can't independently tell me, then I'll list off a few songs, and then they can choose that way. But it's putting as much choice and control back in the hand of the individual through the music. And the power being that connection. Because at end of life, that's often people are wanting life validation, wanting to be able to communicate and connect. There's one other story related to that, which was, again, this individual had a stroke, so language was very challenging. And we were singing the song together, "Love Me Tender," and she said, and she could mouth the words, but she didn't ever speak to me, but she picked up her phone and said, "Call Larry." And I was a little confused because our hospice nurse's name was Larry, and I thought, oh dear, but I clarified, and she motioned to look through her phone and find Larry, so I called Larry and introduced myself, and I said, I was told by this individual to call you, and she said, sing it. And so I held the phone up between the two of us, and we sang "Love Me Tender" to this individual on the phone. And when I put the phone back to my ear at the end, after I'd given the phone to her, and then he said, we had an argument, And this was a way for her to communicate. I can't tell you, clearly their argument had not been verbal, but yeah, so using the music and the lyrics of the music sometime to communicate what an individual wants to say, but no longer has the words to say.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
One question I had also was around the power of singing in community. And I mean, I think community can be relatively small or larger, but as opposed to in the shower by yourself. And I had an experience as a non-singer, but I can hear you correcting me, Mary.
We can think of another word.
Of last year, my son was in a musical, and I'd just been dropping him off, all the time. And so one night, finally, I went in, and it was Oliver. And it was this multi-age cast. And they were, I don't remember which song it was, but it was, 60 people from 8 up to 80, actually, all singing together. And it was just so moving. And so it was curious just for me to reflect on what was the power of that. And so in your experiences, the difference between singing on one's own as opposed to this community experience.
That's another big question. There's lots of directions we can go with that. And do you want to start?
I can start in, often when I come in with a guitar and offer and I say, please sing along, and people will say exactly, oh, you don't want me to sing, or oh, I don't sing. But then there's something about live music, like sometimes we'll sing individually in our cars or in the shower, as you're saying, when we're listening to recorded music, but there's something about live music that makes a person want to engage and sing along. I don't know how to put words to it, but what I notice, for example, in a nursing home, so in hospice work, we go to wherever the individual is at. So that may be in their home, it may be in a nursing home, it may be in the hospital. But if I'm meeting with someone in a nursing home, kind of off in a corner, or even in a room, the music draws people, and suddenly there'll be people in their wheelchairs outside the door to the room, or they'll come over and start singing, or you'll see around the common area. Music calls people to engage and to join together. And again, when you're in a nursing home and the individuals have dementia, it kind of brings them up and gets people that maybe weren't even aware they were sitting across the table from each other having a shared experience of singing together. So that's always my goal. I mean, I love it if people will join in, and I always say, oh, it's not about how it sounds, it's about how it feels to sing, and how it feels to sing with somebody else. So,
cool. One clarification I want to make sure is everyone's aware is that my background is music education, and Rhonda is a board-certified music therapist. So I don't have the training to be a music therapist, even though I started out as a music therapy major as an undergraduate until one of my professors said that it's hard to find a job as a music therapist. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that. So just to clarify that, because when I go into these projects, I'm coming into it from an education standpoint. And what I've noticed, the Oakdale Choir began in 2009, in February. And from that season, and now we're in our 17th season, when we sing in unison, the whole group in unison, if you were to listen to just a little bit of recording from early on and then as we progressed, people have commented this as well, the sound has become more like one unified sound. And that, I think, has paralleled the growth of the choir as a communal body, because this was a pilot project when we started. We weren't certain if we were going to continue. We weren't certain how the prison would feel. And it is the only program that I know of on the globe that has a large number of outside volunteers coming in every week and singing with inside singers, and also does a songwriting component, and also does a reflective writing component. So there's, I think, a lot of interesting kind of symbolism of people who have been accused of committing crimes against society, singing in unison and harmony with people from that very society. So what the choir, it continues to grow and evolve with purpose, but I think this concept of communal body could possibly be thought of in a really broad way. For example, in the October newsletter called The Voice, is that what it's called? The Oakdale Voice, the prison newsletter, which has grown tremendously. We have the original, Mike, who's the Inside Out director. You were the editor of The Kite. And then you're still doing it. So anyway, one of the inside singers wrote that after the choir started at Oakdale, that opened the doors to a lot of other volunteer programs. So perhaps you could think of the communal body, not only of the people together singing, but how it's influenced in this particular facility a variety of other opportunities for education, a parenting class, a job club, a writer's workshop, pen and paper club, a few other things. And I could probably talk about this question for a while, but maybe I should let you go to the next one.
I wanted to actually give you both an opportunity to potentially ask each other something that you're curious about each other's work. And then I want to leave time for people here to ask questions. So if something arises right now that you have a question to ask, and otherwise we can open it up. Yeah.
Thinking.
Maybe just, what do you find is the most, what are you most excited about right now within the activities you're doing?
Wow. I'm so passionate about music and using music to help people connect and communicate. It's hard to pick. So sometimes it is like you're talking about. It's helping people write songs to communicate what they want to say. I don't know that I like my job and the way I use music that I can't choose just one thing.
I know. You don't have to say one, you can say five.
Yeah, well,
we don't have time.
sake of time. But one another just specific story that also helps to define is one time was visiting someone, again, had been said in final days, and the family had said, well, we want to sing together. And so often that's what we do when I visit in final days. It's about using the music and knowing that at end of life, sound and touch are two senses that remain. And in this particular case, though, the family said, we want to let Mom rest in the room and let's sing in the living room. And so we were singing and they said, she'll hear us from there. But then as I gathered my things to leave, her husband said, will you please come back to the room with me? I want you to sing The Wind Beneath My Wings. And he climbed into bed with her and he cradled her in his arms. And I just thought, because music also does this, is it raises your emotions, just kind of, it opens your heart. And I thought, oh, I hope I can do this, because so then I was able to step back and think, I'm facilitating a moment, but I'm going to just turn my eyes, avert my eyes. So the music's facilitating the moment, and they are having their moment together. And, if you think through the words of that song, and he said at the end, I know she heard me, I know she knows, that she really was the wind beneath my wings. So sometimes it's using a song that's already been created, and sometimes it's helping someone create their own song that says who they love and who's important to them and what's been important to them in their life. And I also didn't touch on, it's also, for many people, music is a very spiritual and faith-based experience. And so that's another way to enhance a person's connection to spirituality, to their own spirituality, their own expression of faith, is through the music.
So I have more questions, but we have a wonderfully sized audience here, and I want to give you all an opportunity to ask these two whatever's on your mind.
I have a question.
Yes.
How would I get in touch with you if I know somebody that is not quite at the end of life, and really grow emotionally or whatever? Oh, I'm being recorded.
You are.
I My husband is in a retirement center, a nursing home, as we don't like to say, but people come, play music, He called me today, they played the piano, and he asked him to play Danny Boy. And he said he was crying when it was over, the pianist was crying, and it was the most wonderful thing. So it does help to have music. It doesn't matter, well, it needs to be how you can identify with, but it's helpful in so many ways. I was always the one to go to music things. He would go to football games. So anyway, it works.
Yeah. Thank you.
How do I get in touch?
So your question is how to get in touch. West Music has music therapists so they would probably be in this community, someone you could contact directly, and but we can talk afterwards too about more options.
Anybody else?
How did hospice get the idea to have a music therapist as part of the services they offer?
It's been a growing part of palliative care. Joey should maybe speak to that because Joey Walker is in the back and she was the person involved when hospice first, you were the first music therapist on staff, correct, Joey? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
It's one of those things that, just as you had said earlier, Rhonda, that music works on all levels of the body, of the mind, and of the spirit. And so it also works on total pain, which is a concept in hospice that has been around since the early 1960s. It's about the 1980s that a lot of hospices around the country decided that music therapy was very important, and it's just grown incrementally since there. So I first began my work in 1995 with Iowa City Hospice, and then they didn't start a real program until about 2003, but grown leaps and bounds, and now there are 3 music therapists there. So West Music also provides music therapists in hospice care.
And music therapists officially wear blue and white tie-dye outfits.
Apparently.
It's a thing. Okay, next question.
So my question relates to whether culturally music or singing was more part of life and lifestyle, and now we're trying to reintroduce it. Or, have we missed something along the way? I grew up in India, and my mother, because of my mother who sings, I just assumed that all pregnant women should sing. And turns out that's not true. So I was singing during my labor, and the nurses kept coming, and it was here in Mercy Hospital. So it's sort of like culturally was that some time ago. I'm pretty sure all cultures did it to some extent. If you go back to Alan Lomax's films, which he recorded people like, washerwomen or just daily life. So how do you incorporate that daily life kind of approach into households is a serious issue, because we could actually allow public health problems to be addressed in a big way. So, reintroduction in the home, regular home too.
Yeah, this is a really good question. I want to jump in with a TED Talk I recently saw by my colleague Jeremy Maternach's brother, Brian Maternach, and the talk's called "Why Can't We All Just Sing Along?" Has anybody seen it yet? Why can't we all just sing along? And it's this is such an important topic. You were going to say something.
I was going to say, I think what happened is, I do think we all used to sing, and then somehow that communal creation of music became something we gathered around the radio and listened to happen to us rather than engage us much. And then I also think over time we started somehow to think that there are certain people with gifts And I think that's where you're talking about music. It's a learned skill, but we suddenly thought, oh, there are experts, there are musicians, and those that listen. And I think some of that is culturally what's happened.
And I think that is a big part of the issue with that is from the music education profession. We have had in our history in music education, in fact, on this campus, a professor that, tested to say, oh, you have potential to be a musician and you don't. And there's no sense of any of the idea of we can all learn to sing with that kind of mentality. And anytime someone says the word talent, I say, hold on. It's a skill that we can learn as human, rhythmic skills and vocal skills. So I think it's a real mistaken myth in our culture. And when we have, like what Brian says in that TED Talk, when we used to all sing the national anthem, and now there's usually one person that changes the melody so much it's kind of hard to sing along even if you want to. He said that, so that's from his TED Talk. But we do have the need, we have the potential to create a new reality of saying, hey, let's all sing along. But it does happen only through awareness and changing. If you hear people use that word talent, you might just say, hey, what's informing your decision to use that word? There are other words and ways of thinking when it comes to music making.
Uh-oh, give you a second.
I just had a question with regard to the famous sport or skill of karaoke. And I'm wondering if either or both of you use that in your work, and either your own opinions or what is the generally accepted opinion as to whether people look down on karaoke as not being real music or kind of a crutch, or whether you think it's a good idea for some people to enter or re-enter music.
Go ahead.
I think go for it. I have a graduate student who did a research project on that, and I think a part of this goes into, I'm a pretty careful person when it comes to language, and so how are you defining music? That's a big question. And so my current understanding is from a man named Christopher Small, who defined music as a verb, saying that the most important aspects of music making, and most of our conversation today has been about singing, so let's be specific and use the word singing rather than music, is that it's the relationships that are created through the singing experience. And there are a lot of levels of relationships. There's the relationship between the person and the text that's sung, between the people singing together, between who created the song. So if we're going to a karaoke event, it's the relationships that are created among those people. And the way Christopher Small talks about it is, ideally we're celebrating, exploring, and affirming our sense of ideal relationships that may or may not happen in a group context, because everyone has a different sense of ideal relationships, depending on a variety of things with life experiences, beliefs, etc. So I think if you're having fun, that's a big part of life and you should do it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. And for me, I don't judge kinds of music or styles of music. A lot of times people have assumed, especially from my Mennonite background, oh, you sing hymns when people are dying. No, I sing with that individual, with that family. What are the songs that have been meaningful? So we may be singing, thank God I'm a country boy. It depends what it is that we're identifying as important to who this individual has been. So I think if you're having fun, you're breathing deeply because you're singing, you're tapping your toe, all of those things stimulate endorphin release and help us feel better. So, all good if you ask me. So yes, I'll see you see you there.
My question has to do with the hospice at the Oakdale prison. I wonder if there's ever been an overlap. Has there been much music therapy?
To my knowledge, no, but we started a conversation earlier, but yeah.
Right. They have a choir, they have a hospice choir, and according to some inside singers, that after the Oakdale choir started, the quality of the hospice choir improved. So I do know that much. I haven't been involved too much, but maybe someone else here could talk about that at all? No, maybe, possibly.
I don't know much about it, so.
I was never part of the actual hospice choir. I did sing with the guys a couple times when they were warming up. Basically, typical to what you do. There were some hymns on there, but they would do a variety of music, anything from rock and roll to country. And it started out, I think there was only like 4 or 5 guys who all had learned to play an instrument while in prison. So, yeah, the quality wasn't the greatest, but everybody did really enjoy it. After the choir started, it kind of sparked a whole lot of things going on in the prison. And then you had guys who had been playing guitar since they were 12. All of a sudden, they're in the hospice band. And it just kind of developed that way. And I think at one point in time, they actually had to ask people not to play because there were so many people wanting to play. Obviously, I haven't been there for a couple years, so I don't know how it's doing right now. But, yeah, they do have one. They have a great hospice program overall, and they do play just a wide variety of music. And I think all the guys really love just going in and seeing people actually get up and moving or trying to move when they're singing.
Just within the last 7 days, I had a conversation with the director of hospice for the state of Maine, and they have a music program, but there are no music therapists that are coordinating it. So they have a music program at the, it's a band that performs with the hospice program in the Maine State Prison. And the men who have gone through hospice training have continued, they have a weekly professional development meeting that all of the incarcerated hospice trainers are involved in. So.
Can you both speak a little bit about the role of singing in the body? So, I mean, you referred to the breath, you referred to the release of endorphins. So, what are the... I find singing to be different than, perhaps painting, which is a powerful and very wonderful arts therapy mode, but I think the fact that it's coming directly, that you're in your body, makes it unique.
Mm-hmm. I do have a little anecdote. Within my first few years of being in Iowa City, I was involved in a choir, a church choir, and I was also really under the guidance from my mentors that I needed to publish a lot. So I would bring my notes with me pretty much everywhere I went, and I was editing, and I even did that like during the service, but I couldn't edit and sing at the same time. I tried, just as far as the full, complete, whole self focus that's involved in singing. In my dissertation, I used clarified the difference between vocal singing and instrumental music making, and I used the term word factor and somatic factor, because when we're singing, most songs have a... I want to say, I give a hello to Warden Jim McKinney, who just stepped in the back, who's really allowed a lot more to happen at the Oakdale Prison, including increased audience guest size. So if you would have any interest in coming to the concert Wednesday, December 14, there is a website on the Beauty Before Me song that you can click and sign up. We have about 60 spots open right now. So anyway, the somatic factor is that when we're singing our whole selves, we are the instrument. And there's a lot of levels of what that means. But it's completely different than playing an instrument that's a separate technical component. Not that singing's not technical, singing is very technical. But we are also carrying with us our entire life experience. So if we have a bodily pattern of gasping for breath or tightening our shoulders, that will pretty much come out when we're singing. And that's why learning to sing is a very challenging thing to do, because you many times have to relearn habits that might happen in your body.
And I have to think about that one a bit. So while I use voice a lot, I don't think in my work, oftentimes voice is what people can still engage in. Although there are times if the individual, we certainly put make instruments available if that is the musical expression that's a part of who the individual is. So it's not strictly the singing part. It's the making of the music together or listening together to a recorded piece of music and then talking about the feelings that evokes or the memories associated with that piece. So for me, it's not singing's a part, but it's not the primary way, because it's using music to talk about emotions, and music's it's a very safe container for complex emotions. So the singing part isn't as, it's not all or nothing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Another question?
I'm not sure it's a question as much a tribute, but I went to choir practice last night. Everybody has times where there's a lot going on in their lives. And when I came home, I described it as an escape to go to choirs. You are so engaged, you are so involved, your body, your mind, being in that community, that it's like a vacation to go to a choral practice. And I think we all need that frequent vacation. It's a good way to get it, and your body benefits overall. So I think that's just something I want to say that I feel is most important about us all singing together. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one more question? Yeah.
A very brief question.
I was just wondering if Iowa City Hospice has a choir as well as having music therapists who work alone.
We don't at the moment. The challenge with that is, as a music therapist, what I do is I arrive and then assess, and it's very much here and now and what the needs are at the moment. And if you take in a group that has prepared certain songs, it doesn't necessarily, it's not as patient-centered, patient-focused. And so because a choir would go in kind of with a plan, and as a therapist, I go in with music as my tool, but using whatever's needed at that moment. So sometimes it's getting the individual to sing if they want to sing. Sometimes it's just sing and I want to rest and breathe. And it's just, so we don't at the moment, just because of that part of how we're trying to work with the individual and be very focused on the here and now needs.
And a final question.
Okay. There is a hospice choir.
Sorry, yes.
That goes into different care facilities every month or two.
Okay.
And sings, with June Braverman playing the piano.
Okay.
And a big group of people that do that. But my question was for Mary about if you'd say a little bit about how you can take, right now there are a lot of new inside people in there, and a lot of them probably haven't been in choirs, and the music is pretty challenging, and you really move it along. I'm amazed at how good we can come out and sound at the concert. Like, I only been through one, but it was really good, and how you can bring these people in and along like that.
Well, we'll see what happens this season. We have a lot of new members, which is exciting. I think the theory of community of practice, some of you may be familiar with that, where it's the idea that we now, since the choir's been around since 2009, we have a number of people who have been in it for a while. Out of all the songs we're doing, we are doing a number of them that we've done before, and some that we've adapted and changed, and then new ones. So it's kind of a matter of, bringing the members that have had previous experience, they're the leaders vocally, and we all move forward the best we can and see what happens December 14th. By the way, if anyone is interested, I brought a couple things on that table over there. There are The most recent concert we did in May, there are some programs if you're curious about some of the songs we do and the lyrics of some of our original songs, and a little brochure that was made a few years ago about prison choirs in Iowa, because there's another choir at the Mount Pleasant facility. So there's information there.
Great. Thank you both so much. And there's some cider and cheese and crackers, and if people want to stay and talk a little or ask questions, we can do that. So thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Jennifer.